Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, you're here to hear from Barry Shillingford as he gives us a virtual tour of Minnesota's 64 state parks in 30 minutes-ish. Our presenter tonight has been a rover for 20 years and has spent many of those years on the rover board. He enjoys camping, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, hiking, paddling, and playing pickleball. He has visited all the Minnesota state parks and has camped at every one that offers camping. So please welcome tonight's speaker, Barry Shillingford.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Barry, as Stacy said, and we're going to look at Minnesota state parks. So here's some brief state park information. So there's 64 state parks. They all have hiking trails. Most of them have camping. A lot of them have group camps. They have boat rental. I mean, there's so much fun you can have in these state parks. I was surprised to see they even have stand-up paddle board rental at some of the parks. Some have rock climbing. They have all-terrain track chairs for people that need them, which I think is a great idea. Horse trails, horse camping. I mean, there's so much stuff in that. I'm not going to talk about everything. You'll be happy to know. But I just want to say what I found was cool or different or whatever at each state park. So I retired 4 years ago. I got a nice big tent I could stand up in, a nice foam mattress I could sleep on. And some of the parks I went to on my own in the middle of the week. And some I went at different times. And I wanted to camp at all the state parks I hadn't camped at and also do all the hiking club trails, which I managed to do. I also have a minivan, so if I didn't have time or didn't want to take the time to put up my tent, or if it was storming, I could sleep in the minivan. So that was handy too. So here's the state park straight off the DNR website. So as you can see, the parks are really spread out over the whole of Minnesota, and that was the plan. So everyone can get to a state park fairly easily. Also brings revenue into the small towns that are near the state parks. I figured out that somewhere up here is probably the furthest away from state parks that you can get, and it's about a little over an hour to get to a state park. With us here, we can get to a few of them within an hour. So it's pretty nice to have them all there. So I tried to divide them up into some logical pattern. So this is what I came up with. I don't know how logical it is, but anyway, I'm going to go through them all, and I'm going to go through them in this order and just say a little bit about each one. The first ones I'm going to talk about are along the St. Croix River. You can see here there's a number of them along the St. Croix. So let's look at the central parks. Afton State Park, pretty close to the cities. On the St. Croix, it's got a really nice beach if you want to go boating or if you want to go swimming. Like a lot of parks, it's got some really nice prairie that this deer can hide in here. And it's got a lot of birds that you can see there in the prairie. They claim to have 190 bird species that have been seen there. And I want to point out, if you go to any of the state parks, they should have, if the office is open, a list of birds that have been spotted there. So if you want to start working through the list and see what's there. A little further up the St. Croix is William O'Brien State Park. We've done a couple of rover trips here. We did one a couple of years ago and went cross-country skiing. This year, we just missed it. The snow just melted, darn it. So we didn't do the cross-country skiing, but we hiked instead. But this has a nice, I call this the roller coaster. They have some nice ski trails there. So maybe that will be in luck for next winter there. They also, as well as being on the St. Croix, they have a nice lake for swimming and paddling. So that's a really handy state park, pretty close to us. Interstate State Park, the next one along the St. Croix. This is really scenic. And it's got some pretty awesome geology if you're into geology at all. So it's got this nice gorge on the St. Croix. Another thing it's famous for are these big potholes that have been ground into the rock. And the other thing it has, which Rob is happy about and likes to go there, is the rock climbing. There are 4 state parks that have rock climbing, and this is one of them, and it's pretty close to us, which is kind of handy. Wild River State Park already got a mention because we've done a number of extravaganzas there in the past, and the one coming up in June is going to be there. So the group camps are great, and we normally book a number of them or all of them, and it's a great time. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. The other thing I should point out is a lot of the state parks have interesting history, and at this state park there's actually a logging dam. At least I think it's at this one, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the history as I go along. And here's a view of the St. Croix, really pretty scenic river there. Now this one is a pretty crazy park. This is the biggest state park in the system. It's 34,000 acres and it has 127 miles of trails. So if you want a real achievement, see if you can hike all the trails at this park. It's huge. It has a nice trail along the St. Croix River. There's also a CCC camp there, Civilian Conservation Corps camp, that was there back in the 30s. There's the remains of it now. And the CCC have done a lot of work in a lot of the state parks, including this building here and this furniture. They made it back in the 30s. This is it's beautiful. If you had this, though, you wouldn't be moving it around very often. I'm sure it's really heavy, but it's really, really cool stuff. Oh, I saw a black squirrel while I was there, which I thought was kind of cool. So now off the St. Croix, now coming into town, the nearest park to us in the Twin Cities, at least, is Fort Snelling State Park. This is a pretty interesting park. It's at the confluence of the Minnesota and Mississippi River, so you can paddle around Pike Island. Also talking about Pike Island, this has a little bit of history to it as well. The 1862 U.S.-Dakota War, the Dakota or some of the Dakota were actually imprisoned on that island in 1862 or right thereafter. So that's some of the history there. And there's some other things that used to have a railway line in the park and a quarry, and a lot of them have a lot of interesting history. The other thing that's interesting about Fort Snelling State Park is it floods frequently. And it's kind of interesting to see. I mean, it's kind of not a good thing, obviously, but it is interesting to see how the plants and the wildlife deal with the flooding and how they come back afterwards. It does make it a little more interesting. The other thing that I've noticed here, I've seen a lot of owls there, and I've seen a lot of people running around with cameras with big zoom lenses on them. So I think it's a good place to see barred owls like this one. Lake Maria is a little bit out of the cities. It's up by St. Cloud. This is one of a couple of lightly developed parks, so it only has backpack camping, not drive-in car camping. And it also has a group camp. So if you want to find a nice little secluded backpack site by the lake, you can do that. Also, if you book the backpack site nearest the parking lot, you don't have to go that far if you don't want to do any serious backpacking, or you can go further in if you want to test your backpacking skills. Also, it has some pretty rustic trails there, so a much quieter park. Up near Little Falls, actually right next to Little Falls, is the Charles Lindbergh State Park. This is named after the congressperson and not his son, the aviator, by the way. And it's right next to Little Falls. So if you really don't want to cook at the campsite, you could probably go into town to a restaurant or even order pizza at your site. This isn't out in the wilderness like some. And it's got nice trails in amongst the red and white pines. And it's got a nice little creek, Pike Creek, that then runs into the Mississippi at one side of the park. Mille Lacs Cathio State Park. No surprise, it's near Mille Lacs. It's on the southwest side. And I hadn't been to this until a couple of years ago. I was surprised how much cool stuff was in there. One thing there's an area where there used to be a Dakota village and also a pioneer cabin that they don't know who even lived there. But back in the 70s, I think it was, they did an archaeological dig here. and they found that this site went back about 9,000 years, which is kind of cool. They've also got trails, they've got a swimming beach, and they've also got a fire tower. This is a view from that. There's 4 parks that have fire towers if you like climbing fire towers. And this is one of the residents of the park that wasn't too happy to see us there, but we were just visiting. Then Father Hennepin State Park is right on the south end of Mille Lacs. This is quite a small park, but it's pretty nice. When I was there was some big waves coming down the lake, and someone's in a motorboat, their engine conked out, and so they got washed into the shore. So everyone was pitching in to help them get off the boat and then drag the boat somewhere safe. It's also got a nice picnic area and a really nice beach. And I went swimming there and I was surprised the water was refreshing, but not freezing cold, especially considering a month or so before it was ice. So that was pretty cool. A little further out, 10 miles south of Brainerd, is Crow Wing State Park. This has the confluence of the Crow Wing and the Minnesota River. This is some history here is the Dakota and Ojibwe had a big battle here in 1768. Also, there was an old ox cart trail that used to go across the Mississippi right in this location. Also, there's actually the remains of a town in the park. There's one building left and there's some ruins there. This town died out when the railroad went through Brainerd, crossed the river at Brainerd instead of Crow Wing. Otherwise, maybe this would be a big town and Brainerd wouldn't be there, but that's the way it happened. Banning State Park is up I-35 up near Sandstone. This again had a little town in it. There was a quarry, a working quarry, and some of the workers lived there in the little quarry town. They also had a railway line going in there to take out the big blocks of sandstone, which were used to build some of the buildings in Twin Cities and other places. They also have a geological fault here. This is an uplift fault. Either that side's moved up or the other side's moved down at some time in the way distant past. And it also has the Cattle River running through it, and there's rapids on the river, and that's really pretty. And we also saw a ringneck snake there, which I haven't seen before, so that was kind of cool. Moose Lake State Park, a little further up the freeway. This one's famous for having an agate and geological center in the park, which unfortunately I didn't get a photo of, but I did get a photo of they do agate days in the Moose Lake right near the park. And they do this every July. And if you've never been up here, and it's going on this year, I checked, you should check it out. They bring a big truck or multiple ones. They dump a whole bunch of gravel on Main Street. And when they give the word, everyone runs out with their little spray bottles and they go look for agates. It looks like the gold rush. It's quite cool to watch. Also, they have a nice lake in the park. This is Echo Lake. Moose Lake is actually just outside the park, but good places for paddling. Jay Cook, what I say they're all my favorites, but it's definitely one of my favorites. This is a very pretty park. The St. Louis River runs through here. It's a really cool park for geology. You can see how the rocks have been tilted up almost vertical there. It's also nice with the fall colors at that right time of year. And the Superior Hiking Trail also goes through this park. And you can hike from here down to the start of the Superior Hiking Trail on the Wisconsin border. It also has this swing bridge built again by the CCC and rebuilt 3 or 4 times because it's got washed out a number of times when there's been flooding up there. Savannah Portage State Park, this is northwest of there. It's called Savannah Portage because there was a historic portage here when the voyagers were trading furs and stuff. And there's a 6-mile portage from the St. Louis River to the Mississippi River. 6 miles took them 5 days because they had to carry their canoes and all the other stuff they were carrying and go through the woods and through the swamps, up the hills and so on. So that was pretty crazy. And they've got a really nice trail here, which is on a glacial esker, so it drops away on both sides here. It's a ridge line. And this is also the continental divide between the St. Louis River, which goes into Lake Superior, and the Mississippi River, which goes down into the Gulf of Mexico. So it's kind of interesting. So that's the center parks done. Now the Northeast, a lot of these parks are right along the shore of Lake Superior, which is really pretty and really nice. But the difficult thing about that is they all have rivers and waterfalls. So it is hard to differentiate one from the other, but I'll do my best. So first one is starting at the south end, Goodsbury Falls. This is normally the most visited state park. It's either this or Fort Snelling or Itasca. So it does get real busy, but you can always hike off on the trails and find some quiet spots. This, I think, in some respects has the most impressive waterfalls because they're very big and wide. And also, I should say, if you haven't been up to the falls in winter, you should really go because the falls freeze up, but you can still see the water flowing and hear it in the background of the waterfall. Or go up in spring when the snow is melting, if we get snow, and then the waterfalls are really crazy and a lot of water going over them. So that's Goodsbury. Split Rock Lighthouse does have a river and a waterfall, but it also has a lighthouse, which gets photographed a lot. This is one of the most photographed lighthouses in the U.S., and it's on this big hunk of volcanic rock, which makes it stand out. Also, there is where 3M started when they were mining for corundum, which they never found, and instead they started doing other things like post-it notes, etc. So there's some ruins there that you can see. Again, some more history in the park. Next up from that is Tedagooch State Park. One thing this has, which is a little different, is you can come in the back way, hike 1.7 miles uphill and bring your stuff in. You can't drive in here, and you can stay in these cabins. And it's really quiet in the back here, and you're right by a lake, and it's really pretty back there. Also, this has the highest waterfalls completely in Minnesota. They're 60 feet high on the Baptism River. You can see them right there. And they also have Palisade Head, another place where you can go climbing, another big chunk of volcanic rock. This is rhyolite, in case anyone cares. George H. Crosby Manitou State Park. This is a little off Lake Superior. It's just up the top of the hills. It's about 4 miles as a crow flies. And this is like Lake Maria. It's a lightly developed park. So there's only backpack camping. And again, a river with a nice waterfall. This is the Manitou River. Very pretty, pretty rustic. And that's one of the campsites. Again, if you get the one near the parking lot, it might be a quarter of a mile hike in, or you can get one further down and you can hike in maybe a mile or two if you want to. Temperance River State Park. I don't know whether you all know this, but the reason it's called the Temperance River is it's the only river in the area that doesn't have a bar at the entrance of the river to the Lake Superior. So that's a little bit of pioneer humor there. So that's why it's called that. That has a much narrower scenic gorge, which is kind of very pretty, and nice waterfall there. And this also has some pretty impressive potholes like Interstate does. So that's another thing you can see there. Cascade River State Park, quite similar. It has a narrow gorge, but this one has just a whole series of smaller waterfalls. So it drops, the river drops 900 feet in the last 3 miles, and you can hike all the way up along the river. So very scenic. And the Superior Hiking Trail, I think it goes through all these parks along Lake Superior. I know it definitely goes through that one. Judge Magny State Park, what this is well known for is what's known as the Devil's Kettle, where half the Brule River disappears down this hole right here, and the other half flows as normal. And last time I was looking it up, they don't really know where it goes. It's pretty obvious it ends up in Lake Superior, but they don't know exactly how. But maybe it goes down a lava tunnel, a fault in the rock, or something like that. But that's kind of cool. There's also some foundations from a transient work camp from 1934 that you can see there that the trees have grown up through. So it's quite interesting. And then Grand Portage State Park is the last park along the shore there. This one has no camping. It's right on the Canadian border. One thing to watch for, your phone will switch to Eastern time before you get to the park. So don't let that confuse you. And it's named after a portage that the Ojibwe Native Americans had that went from the Pigeon River to Lake Superior, which was 9 miles long. And what this has is this big this waterfall. This is the highest waterfall. It's partly in Minnesota because it's right on the border. And this is 120 feet high. And also, I've seen some photos of this where it's a lot bigger in the spring. I was there in late summer or fall. And if you go different times, and that's something I should point out. Obviously, these state parks are very different at different times of the year. So definitely want to go more than once. Then going up away from Lake Superior up onto the Iron Range. This park was a combination of two parks, Lake Vermilion and Sudan underground mine. So now it's got both. So now it has the underground mine and it has camping and other things. You can go down the mine, which I have done in the past. Also, if you go on the hiking club trail, you can hike through the mine area. And I did that in the evening, in the middle of the week when it was just super quiet. I was the only one there, and I could take a look at the mine buildings. And this is what the mine was all about. This is the banded iron formation. This is a ridiculously hard rock, which took them a long time to drill, but its iron content is very high. So once they get it drilled, it was very valuable. And here's the Lake Vermilion, which is a natural lake. And it's the fifth largest lake in Minnesota. There's a bunch of islands in the middle and little inlets and stuff. So it's a real fun lake to go paddling on. And at the group camp, they got a number of group camps. One of them has this really nice shelter. So if you want to get away from the bugs, if it's a buggy time of year, or get out of the rain, if it's raining, then that's a really nice handy shelter. Bearhead Lake is a little northeast of there, and it's right near the Boundary Waters, and it looks kind of like the Boundary Waters. You've got a lot of nice old pine trees. You've got a lake there. So great for paddling. Also has a great swimming beach. If you like swimming in lakes and rivers like I do, then you can check that out. So that's the central and the northeast. Now, down in the south, we've got the most state parks, probably because that's where the most population is. The first few I'm going to go through are all along the Mississippi, and all of the ones in this area, hopefully you can see my cursor down there, are in what's called the driftless area, which is where the last glacier did not go. So it wasn't glaciated. So you've got a lot of bluffs there. So the first one's Frontenac, which is about an hour or so from the cities. And that has really nice views from the bluffs over Lake Pepin on the Mississippi. Also, there's this rock formation in I believe it's limestone on the side of the bluff, which is interesting, and the hiking trail goes down there. Again, there's a lot of birds at this place. We see a lot of raptors, particularly vultures, more than anything I've seen here. The next one down is John Latch State Park. This one is closed right now, and it doesn't have camping, though it used to at one time. And a lot of the park isn't even open. There's not trails in it or anything. So basically what it is it's this long stairway. You can hike up all the way to the top of Charity Bluff. It's called that because there's three bluffs in a line, and the river pilots called them Faith, Hope, and Charity. And they used to use them as they're piling the boats up the Mississippi. So you go all the way up these steps, and then you get these beautiful views of the river, and there you can see a tugboat out there. And yeah, and you can see how kind of rickety these steps are. So that's why it's closed now. They're rebuilding these steps. So I think it's going to open again this year. I really wish they'd put in camp in there and put at least some trails in the rest of the park. Maybe not really, overdevelop it, but a few trails in there would be good. But I don't know what their plans are. And what's cool here is sometimes you can see the vultures and eagles from up above, which is, I think, kind of cool. Further down the Mississippi, Great River Bluff State Park. Again, we got the bluffs. These are even higher, 500 foot above the Mississippi River. And you can see a lot of nice little backwaters down there that would be really good to paddle in. Of course, you can't access them from the park, but gives you something to think about in the next trip. Also, I saw going in midweek, I think you see more wildlife. It's a lot quieter. I saw a couple of young deer with their mom there. And then this I thought was really cool. I saw a grouse running across the road, and all her chicks are over here chasing after her. So I did stop and let them cross the road, but I thought that was super cute. So a little away from Mississippi is Beaver Creek Valley State Park. This is right down in the southeast. You're almost in Iowa. It's a quite small park, but again, it's in the driftless area. So you've got these bluffs. It's heavily wooded, and there's some really nice hiking down there. The other thing that you get in the bluffs area is you get trout streams. So this stream, Beaver Creek, is coming right out of the bottom, right out of the base of the limestone bluff. And it comes out at 48 degrees all year round. So in the winter, that would feel warm, but not so much in the summer. And here's the creek, and it's coming out right there. And then Whitewater State Park, this is a super popular park, and I know a lot of rovers have been there. We've had a lot of trips down to Whitewater. Again, the big thing about Whitewater is the bluffs. Here's the group camp. We used to do the Halloween program there, and then you can go hiking up on the bluffs. You can do a 6-mile round trip up and down the bluffs, and you go up and down the bluffs 4 times. So it's a nice workout to do when it's not too hot there. Also, it has some interesting history. Here I am posing on top of the cistern of what was the for the shower room of what was the CCC camp. Then during the war, it became a German prisoner of war camp. After that, it became a scout camp, and then at some time it got hit by a tornado, and then they moved the camp to the other location. So a lot of, like I say, a lot of interesting history here. And when we were there, I don't remember what this was last time, but we saw a stick insect. I don't think I've ever seen these before, but we saw a stick insect right in our campsite, which was really cool. Carley State Park is near Whitewater. This I think of as the quieter, smaller version of Whitewater. It's similar, but a lot quieter. And this I took from Google Earth. You can see the North Fork of the Whitewater River does this big horseshoe bend, and you've got these bluffs all around, and the park is right here. So if you go on the hiking club trail, you go up this bluff, you cross the river, go around these bluffs and back again. So definitely good to check out. And it's only 8 miles or something from Whitewater. So you can always stay at one and hike at the other anyway. And here you can see the Whitewater River, and there's the stepstones going across it. Another one that we've done a lot of rover trips at is Forestville Mystery Caves. Obviously, you can tell by the name, it has 2 major things going for it. One is Forestville, which was this old town, which ended up dying away. I think it peaked in the late 1800s, 1880s. But it still has some of the buildings there. And if you go the right time of year, they'll let you go in and tour those buildings and learn about the old town. And the thing that I think is really interesting is the cemetery up a hill. It's quite a steep hike to get up there, but it's really interesting looking at these old gravestones in the woods. And these were, again, from the 1880s. And another interesting thing about this, it has a trout stream coming out from a cliff, again, coming out from the limestone. This is Canfield Creek, and then it joins the Whitewater River. Also, the Mystery Cave part, it has the longest cave in Minnesota. One time when we did an extravaganza down there, we got to go caving in places that aren't normally open to the public. So if you don't want to just walk through the cave, if you want to suit up and put your helmet on and crawl through really narrow spaces, you can do that at times if you go with the right people, the caving group. So that was really interesting. Lake Louise, further to the south, is the most southern state park. It has this really pretty lake. Actually, it's a reservoir, but it's still really pretty, and it's got a swimming beach, and of course, hiking trails. And it's also got this old, what do you call it, steel truss bridge, which was an old road bridge. But when it got to be, the traffic got to be too much for it, they moved it from the roads and put it into this park. So that's a little bit of history for this park. Right near Owatonna, or fairly close to Owatonna's Rice Lake State Park. This is a shallow lake which supports wild rice. And it attracts a lot of wildfowl probably to the wild rice, so they can eat it. But kind of interesting little park. And it also has some hardwood forest to hike through as well, but a fairly small park. And as always, there's always critters there. I was sitting in my campsite and actually saw a pileated woodpecker. Normally you hear these, but you don't see them quite as often. Another one in the south, Nerstrand Big Woods. This is pretty close to the cities. I think it's less than an hour from the cities. And this is a remnant of the big woods that they say used to stretch all the way from Minnesota to the East Coast at one time. And there's also a nice hidden falls at the back here, which is very pretty. And again, it varies depending on the time of year as to how much water's going over it. Another thing that's in the park, which is pretty interesting, is the Indian pipe that grows there. Because they're not green, they don't photosynthesize, so they don't need to be in the sun so they can grow in the woods. And they're a parasitic plant that lives off fungi in the ground. Another thing down at this park, and I think I've seen some trips coming up about this, is they have ephemeral flowers coming up in the rare ephemeral flowers coming up in the spring. Myrie Big Island is another park down in the south. They have a lake and they have old hardwood forests. But I went there in the late summer, and the thing I really liked there was these compass plants. If you've never seen these before, they're a native prairie plant, and they orient themselves north-south with the leaves. And these will grow up to 14 feet tall. And I actually have one in my front yard that I've planted there that's been there for a number of years. But it's really nice to see them out in the prairie because you don't see them that often. Cicada Lake State Park, pretty close to the city. City's about an hour or so away. It's got a lake there, obviously, woods and all that stuff. But you get a lot of birds down there. There was just a whole bunch of mainly cormorants up in the trees there. And I also saw some white pelicans in the park. When you go to the west and the south, you seem to see a lot of white pelicans. Minneopa, definitely another of my favorites. And the reason this is one of my favorite is these guys. Minneopa is not that far away, down by Mankato, and you can drive through the bison enclosure. And sometimes you get lucky and they're crossing the road and you can get to see them real close up. And if you camp there, then you can drive through there a few different times during the day, depending on when they're active. And I first went through there and I had my windows down. It was in the summer. And you got these guys like right next to you, the vehicle. I could have leant out and patted it on the head, which I didn't do. But it was kind of scary. It was really fun, but it was a little scary having these guys so close. But these guys are so cute. You just want to put them in the back of your van and take them home. Just these bison calves are so cute, but I know they'd get a little too big, and I'd have to do something with them. So there is also the history here. This is an old windmill in the park. Too bad you can't go inside it, but you can look at it from the outside, which is kind of cool. And there's more. There's also a really pretty waterfall here, which people have been going to look at for probably about a lot of years. People first started going down to look at this waterfall because it's very pretty. And you can also hike down to see where this creek, the Minneopa Creek, goes into the Minnesota River. So a lot of the number of these parks in this area right along the Minnesota River, which is a pretty interesting river. Flandreau State Park is right down by New Ulm. It's very close. And we were down there in the spring, and the cool thing then, we did a lot of hiking, and the hiking trails were icy in the morning and muddy in the afternoon. But the ice was breaking up on the Cottonwood River. So every now and then, all this ice would start moving. And so I was trying to give it a helping hand there and get the ice going and try not to slip in. We also, while we were there, we saw a coyote crossing the ice, but it couldn't get all the way across. So it got this far, and then it had to swim the rest of the way. But that was kind of cool to see. Another real interesting park out to the west and along the Minnesota River is Fort Ridgely, and obviously this has some interesting history. It was built up on the bluff above the Minnesota River, which is down there, but you can't see it. Minnesota River is in this huge valley because 10,000 years ago it was a big glacial river, and it was much bigger. Another point there, they've got some nice prairie there. And when I was there in the late summer, there was a lot of butterflies. But getting back to the history, this is where the old fort was, and that got attacked twice during the 1862 war. And after they abandoned this fort, they left this fort. Not much of it was left because people in the area would help themselves to bricks and wood and other stuff to build their houses and sheds and whatever else. But now there's some of it left that you can see. But it's a really nice state park. Kylan Woods, this is quite a ways down in the southwest. When I've been here in the summer, it seems when you get down in the southwest, it can get a lot hotter than the Twin Cities. First time I was here, it was 90 degrees every day. But if you like that, that's good. And as the Des Moines River runs through it, it's kind of a scenic little river, some woods, and also some really nice prairie there. And if you go in the late summer, I've really got an appreciation for prairie going to the state parks because you get all the flowers there. It's really pretty. And then as you get in late summer and fall, you get reds and browns as everything changes color and things start to die back. Lake Chautauqua State Park down in the southwest. Two things about this. It's got a big lake there. It's the biggest lake in southwest Minnesota, and they built a causeway out to the lake many years ago so you can hike out to the island in the lake. So you can hike out to the island. The big thing about this place, they have a memorial again to the 1862, for the 1862 war to the settlers that were killed that farmed in that area. Camden State Park, another nice little park down in the southwest. I'd never heard of this until I went there a couple of years ago. It's got the Redwood River runs here and goes up to Redwood Falls. That's very pretty. They got some nice woods. They've got camping. They've got a group camp, swimming beach, all that good stuff. But they got some really nice prairie. And I'm sure if you were there later and it was all flowering, it'd look even better. But this kind of reminded me of Scotland or somewhere like that. But this is what they call the high prairie because it's up out of the river valleys, and you can see for miles here. And as I was hiking back, I saw a couple of vultures up in a tree, so I had to get that picture. They're so cute. And also down there in the southwest is Blue Mound State Park, another one with bison. These have a much bigger enclosure, and I couldn't even see the bison until I zoomed in with my camera, and they were way out in the park. But what you can do is there's a bison buggy you can buy a ticket for, and they'll take you out into the enclosure, which is what I would like to do next time. A couple other things about this park. It has this famous Sioux quartzite, which is this really bright pink colored rock. And there's my campsite. There's my van right on top of that cliff there. They also have this mysterious rock alignment. They don't know who set up these rocks in a line, whether it was Native Americans or settlers, but they've never figured out who it was. But it's another pretty park. Split Rock Creek State Park, not to be confused with Split Rock Lighthouse State Park. And I have heard some people make reservations at the wrong one, and this is like the opposite end of the state. So this has some really nice prairie. It's supposed to be really great flowers in the late summer. I was there early. It's got a historic water tower up there. And like a lot of them, it's got a nice lake or reservoir where you can go swimming or paddling or just laying out on a floaty thing out there. So now some of the parks out in the west area. So here, if you can see my cursor, this is the Minnesota River. So you can see there's some of the parks are along the Minnesota River, including the next one. So this one is Lacapal, which in French means the lake that talks. And it's supposedly called that because that's what the Native Americans called it, because there's often a lot of birds there. Of course, when I was there wasn't a lot of birds, but I was there in the wrong time of year, not in the spring, I guess. But this lake is actually on the Minnesota River where it's a natural lake, but they also put a dam there, I believe. And it's where the river widens out. The other thing here is there's supposedly the biggest tree in Minnesota, like not the tallest, but the biggest. This is a huge old cottonwood that you can hike to from the campsite. It's super close to the park. Some of western Minnesota is very flat, but there's also a lot of glacial moraine out there. So Sibley State Park and a number of others are quite hilly. This hill is 1,376 feet high, which isn't super high, but it's the highest hill for 50 miles around. So you get nice views from the top. This is an old tower built by the CCC. This is called Mount Tom, and no one knows why it's called Mount Tom. So another little state park mystery. They have a real nice lake there. Actually, there's 4 lakes, and there's portages between them. So if you want to do a nice long paddle, you could do that, or there's a nice beach for swimming. One thing I found here, which was really cool, is a tiny little snapping turtle. And it was so cool because it's so small, but it looks just like a big snapping turtle, just really tiny. The other thing that was there as we were packing up our tent, there was a cicada just molted on the side of the tent. And I didn't want to wrap it up in the tent, so I took it off and put it in a tree. And then like 5 or 10 minutes later, it started singing up in the tree. So I was obviously happy to be up there. Glacial Lake State Park, which is near Sibley, is very similar. It's got these hills and prairie, and this is where they've conserved some rare tall grass prairie. And there was a lot of prairie in Minnesota at one time, but there's very little of it left. So it's really nice to see some areas where they've restored it or conserved it. And it's got a nice hardwood forest, mainly oak trees in here to hike through too. The other cool thing that was here, and this is the only place I've seen it, was see hummingbird moths. They look just like hummingbirds, and then you look closer and you see, well, it's not a bird, it's a moth. So they're kind of cool to see, but they don't stay still, so I never got a photograph of them. Another park out west is Monson Lake State Park. This is quite a small park, and it's basically a memorial to the settlers that were killed there, that had farms there. So you got this memorial up there, and it also, as its name suggests, has a lake with a lot of, at the time I was there, a lot of white pelicans. So it's a pretty small park, but definitely worth a visit. This one is right out on the South Dakota border. It's the most westerly park. Big Stone Lake is where the Minnesota River starts from. One thing that was really interesting here was out in the woods, which are very shady, there was all this bright green grass. And I'm like, how can all this grass grow in the shade? But it's not grass, it's actually sedges. So I got a lot of these and I planted them in my backyard because my backyard's super shady. So I'm trying to see if I can get them to grow. Another thing, I often take my trail cam when I go camping and I put it out in the campsite at night to see what wanders through the campsite at night. And I've had foxes and cats and raccoons. And this night we had this guy came through the camp at night. But if I hadn't put my camera out, I would never have known that there was a skunk wandering through our campsite at night. So that was kind of cool to see. So Lake Carlos, again, definitely one of my favorites. I really like Lake Carlos. This is up near Alexandria. The last 2 years, we've had rover trips up there at the group camp. We want to book it and do one this year, the second weekend of September. So there's my shameless plug. But it has a really nice group camp. It's nice and big. It's got a shelter there if it's raining. It's even got electric in the shelter, so it's pretty luxurious. And you're right next to the lake over here. So it's really nice. There's hiking trails and all that stuff. A beach right near the group camp. There's also a state water trail that goes from the lake on the Long Prairie River. So you can paddle for quite a ways too, if you want to. So there's a lot of stuff to do up there. Or you can go into Alexandria and find a brewery or whatever. And there's also a bike trail there. So lots of things to do. So look out for that later this year. And it's got nice prairie. We were there in September and all the flowers were out on the prairie. Another interesting state park out that way is Glendalough State Park. This used to be a private retreat and a game farm for some of the owners of the Star Trib newspaper. This doesn't have regular driving campsites. It has cart-in sites. And again, if you get one near the parking lot like I did, it's not too far to cart your stuff. It was raining next day, which was a little inconvenient, but it wasn't too bad. But they've got these nice sites. They've also got some canoe sites and some a group camp and a couple of lakes there. This was interesting. This trail goes along an ancient ice ridge from when the lake was higher, maybe hundreds, maybe 1,000 years ago. And the ice each year would push up this ridge. Now they've got another ridge forming closer to the lake, existing lake. And I saw this deer here with this nice set of antlers. This one is somewhat unique, Maplewood. A lot of the state parks are there to conserve some existing prairie or something. This was a case more of rewilding. This area was all farmland, but then they decided it was too hilly for farms. So instead, there was a move to make it into a state park instead, which is what they did. But here's some of the old farm equipment left. But if you see this, all these hills and lakes, it's not so good for farming. But what it is good for, because there's woods on the border of prairie, you get a lot of birds here, especially in the spring. So I was staying here last May. I used my Merlin app. I left my phone out on a log for 10 or so minutes, and I got 25 different species of birds that the Merlin app heard. That's a great app to use, but there's just a lot of birds there. So it's really, really cool. Buffalo River State Park, pretty small park, but it's got the Buffalo River, which is quite scenic, and woods around the river. And then it's got some really nice prairie out there. So it's a really nice place to hike around. So now I'm going to do North Central. There's a group of parks here that I kind of grouped together. McCarthy Beach is up there. I'd never been to this one until I went on a rover trip a couple of years ago. And as the name suggests, they have a beach. They have some lakes there, and it's really nice paddling because you can paddle between the lakes along these creeks and kind of do a loop and almost end up where you started from. And here's the beach that I was talking about. It's really nice for swimming. If you can see this, the sand goes way out, so you can go out about a quarter of a mile, and it's a really shallow lake. So great place to take kids, and people stop their boats out there and swim. But if it's crowded and you want to get away from the crowds, if you hike the trails, you can get out in the woods and probably not even see anyone. Scenic State Park. This one is north of Grand Rapids, about 40 miles. And again, it has an esker, but this one goes straight out into the lake. So it drops away on both sides, and they've got these really nice tall pine trees along there. And the other thing they have here, which we noticed, which we saw along the trail, was lady slipper orchids. This is the state park of Minnesota, real pretty flowers, and you don't see these that often, but there's a few places you can find them, and they're right along the trail in the Scenic State Park, which was pretty cool. Schoolcraft State Park. Some of the state parks are the lesser used parks, and they used to be cheaper to camp at them, but I don't know whether they do that anymore. But they're definitely quiet, not as crowded as some. This one is named after Schoolcraft, who found the origin of the Mississippi River, and it's along the Mississippi River, and also there's the Vermilion River right there. So it's good for paddling because you can paddle into the backwater of the Vermilion River, or you can hike or swim or whatever else. Lake Bemidji State Park is on the north end of Lake Bemidji. And one thing this is known for is it has a bog. You can hike through the bog. If you're interested, Minnesota has more bog than any other state in the lower 48. And bog is kind of an interesting ecosystem. And it also Minnesota has the biggest bog in the lowest 48, and that's the Big Bog State Rec area, which is worth a visit. Because one of the things you find in bogs are these carnivorous plants, which are kind of interesting. And here's a pitcher plant. Now, the other really interesting thing that happened while we were here the first time was that there was a tornado warning, and they got all the campers down into the basement of the visitor center. Who knew they had a basement in the visitor center? We didn't know, but it was kind of cool because everyone was down here, and we're all sitting down there chatting, hoping the tornado didn't come through. And that was 2010, I think. And we actually did a trip down the Mississippi for 60 miles camping along the river. But we finally got to a state park at the end, and that's when we had the tornadoes. And that year, Minnesota had more tornadoes than any other state. It had, like that day, I think there was supposed to be more than 20 or so. It was a crazy year. The next day, it was just windy, and here I am practicing my kayaking in big waves on the Bemidji, Lake Bemidji, which was kind of fun. Here's a park that we used to go to a lot with rovers. We don't go so much these days since they closed down the hostel. But a lot of people, I think, have been here. But if you haven't, you should check it out. This is the oldest park in the system. It's also the second largest park. It's also the source of the Mississippi. And it's really, so it comes out of Lake Itasca. And then it's pretty narrow to start off with. You can paddle down the Mississippi. And you can kayak down there too. And when you get out of the park, you end up in the thick undergrowth here. And then there's some rapids further down. It's quite fun. When we were there one time, there was this fox running around the road, and it was like jumping up at the car like it wanted to get in, which was really weird. I don't know why it was doing that. Okay, so now we're up to the northwest. Now these are the last parks, and these are the furthest away from pretty much anywhere, unless you live up there, furthest away from the Twin Cities. I mean, these are like a 6-hour drive. So it's nice to do another park on the way up and on the way back. So Franz Jevny State Park is the smallest park in the whole system. It's right up on the Canadian border. It's also up on the Rainy River. So there's the Rainy River. There's Canada right over there. when we were up there, it was flooded, and I think there's rapids here normally, but the river was just really fast. It was flowing from right to left really fast, and then there was an eddy coming the other way almost as fast from left to right. So it was pretty cool. Also, if you're into geology at all, there's a 2.1 billion year old bedrock outcrop right in the middle of the woods there, which seems kind of weird that it's just sitting there. So this is Franz Jevny up on the Canadian border up here. And here, which is the smallest park, here is the largest park in the system, St. Croix State Park. And those are to scale. So St. Croix State Park is 283 times bigger than Franz Jevny. So isn't that cool? So there's a lot of diversity in these parks. There's different environments there, different wildlife, different size, different things to do. So it's definitely worth visiting a bunch of the parks. Zipple Bay is the most northerly park. It's right up on Lake of the Woods, where there's these nice sandy beaches, and you could almost feel like you're in the tropics in the summer here, not in the winter when it's all frozen over. So it's great for paddling. You can paddle out in the lake, or if it's too windy, you can paddle in the creek in Zipple Creek. Another one up there is Old Mill State Park. One thing I didn't point out, but hopefully you've noticed, is all these different kinds of signs. I think they're really neat. They're so different, one from the other, and I think they're kind of works of art. So that's why I like to get a picture of each of them. So this state park is famous for having an old mill. This was a water mill at one time. Then they rebuilt it to a steam mill in 1897, and now they actually run it, if they still do it, one time a year. So if you want to go up and see the steam mill running, you can do that. Also, they have a old stone bridge built in 1937 by the WPA, which is Works Progress Administration, which was kind of like the CCC. They had a bunch of these different groups back in the 30s building things in the parks. Hayes Lake State Park has a nice reservoir or lake with a nice beach, so it's good for paddling. They also have another bog that you can hike around. Lake Bronson. So Lake Bronson is the furthest park. This is right up in the northwest corner, furthest from the Twin Cities. And another thing I want to point out with this park, there is a herd of elk up in the northwest, or maybe a couple of them. So when you go up there, keep your eyes peeled in case you see any elk. We didn't see any elk up there, but look out for them. So this is a reservoir, and there's a river there too, but it's good for paddling. We didn't get to paddle when we were up there, so I want to go back. But one interesting thing about this, right now they're draining the lake as we speak. So if you want to go up there this year, you could see what the lake looks like with hardly any water in it. And then they're going to rebuild the dam, and they're going to fill it up again, and it'll be back to like this, I think is in a couple of years, 2027. And there's one of the rivers coming off the lake, and there's a couple of critters we saw on the lake. I always like this picture. It's like giving it a dirty look for getting on its log. And that's the last slide, and I'm open for questions. And I know I said 30 minutes, but that was aspirational, 30 minutes.
That was fantastic, Barry.
Thanks. I almost regret offering to do this because it was a lot of work, and there's a lot of parts, and it's a lot to get through, but I really would like to get people more interested in traveling in more of these parks because, before I'd done this, I'd been to Whitewater maybe 5 times, but a lot of these parks I'd never been to. So it is nice to get out there and get to some of the further away parks. So.
Barry, how long did it take you to do all these?
Well, over the years, I'd already done over half of them, just different times. But then when I retired, I started doing trips where I'd go out, I'd go to one state park, do the hiking club trail camp there, then do another one, hiking club trail camp, then go home, and then I'd do another one. So I got them finished up, I think, in probably 3 years. And then last year, was it the year before? I don't know, I can't keep track. But I went up to the North Shore because there's a couple I hadn't camped at, and I hadn't done the hiking club trails. So I did all the ones like along Lake Superior and then St. Croix in 3 days. So, and it's better if you can spend longer there, but it's nice to go visit them. So,
So there is a question in the chat. Is there any good parks for fishing?
oh, is there any good parks for fishing? Actually, lots of parks for fishing. I actually have. I managed to find. I made some inquiries to this to the DNR when I had a couple of questions of things, and they were really nice in getting back to me. And one thing they did is they gave me I found a matrix. Sent me a spreadsheet, and it has a matrix of all the things going on in the state parks. So I could easily go into here and I could pick fishing and see how many state parks have fishing. And I'm sure it's probably about half of them.
Barry, there was a question about your favorite park.
Favorite park. That's really, really hard because number one, it depends what time of year you go there because they're different at different times of year. I mean, I really like the popular parks like Whitewater. I've been there a number of times. It's great. Forestville. But some of the ones out west, I was really impressed with. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of nice parks. Depends what you want in them. If you want to go rock climbing, you have less to choose from, Rob. But if you want to go camping, you've got a lot of places to choose from.
Better watch out. I'm a teacher, so this could be a while. No, I just had a question. I'm so intrigued by Prairie, and you mentioned several parks, and even one that reminded you a little bit of the British Isles, I think you said, or Scotland. And it's Camden Lake. And I always bring paper. I'm kind of like a perpetual student with paper, but I was just going to ask about that. And then the best time for flowers that you would say to visit Prairie. So.
Yeah, the one I mentioned was Camden, but a lot of the parks have some nice prairie, and the best time of year generally is the late summer. The prairie plants, unlike the plants you buy at the store, they normally come out in the late summer. Actually, last year we had my now wife and I had a backyard wedding, and we had that in July, and we got lucky because we have cut plants, and they were coming out, and a lot of the flowers in the backyard were coming out. So July, August, September, I think is the best time. But you can look up the parks. They have great websites for every park and have information about what they have at that park. Someone also mentioned that Nerstrand has wonderful spring ephemerals. Yep. A lot of different things there at different times of year. And you could go, we've been to some in the winter. They have some great camper cabins that have heating. So we went to Forestville in January one year.
Can you put the slide up that shows the map with the different groupings? I think it was like way at the beginning.
Yeah.
This presentation will also be on YouTube. And so you'll also be able to see that slide when you bring up
So
that.
there's
Yep.
and that's on the DNR website. If you just go to search state parks, you can either get them in alphabetical order or you can get them on the map here. And
Hey, it's Casey.
Thank you.
hi.
Hey, Barry, that was a fantastic job. Just a really,
Thank you.
really good presentation. But I was just going to point out, was it Carly State Park is famous for its bluebells.
Yeah.
So around Mother's Day, they'll be just carpeting the forest floor up there. So if anybody's interested in that, just want to point that out.
Yeah, it's really nice to go to these places at different times of the year because you never know what you're going to find there. Yeah.
And then the other thing I just throw out is that southwest corner is just of the state has so many cool places to visit. And so if anybody is planning a trip to Blue Mounds, just north of Blue Mounds State Park is Pipestone
Yeah.
National Monument. And so you can see I think one of the few places in North America where the pipestone is quarried for the pipes that are used by indigenous people. And then the Jeffers petroglyphs is near there
Oh,
too.
yeah.
And so just amazing petroglyphs in this huge granite slab kind of rising up from the prairie. So just a really cool part of the state.
And I went out there in the late summer too, and it's interesting seeing the harvest going on out there because they just have these combines going and they have like all these trucks waiting to get loaded up. It's quite an operation.
I'll throw in a comment. We recently discovered the Minneopa and the buffalo down there. And also right by there is Welch Heritage Farms apple orchards. And we got some of their pies there. And now we're making pilgrimages right around Thanksgiving to head down and buy a bunch of pies because they're so dang good. So there's my shameless plug for Welch Farm.
Yeah, you run into a lot of other things along the way when you go into the state parks. I mean, it's nice if you try to go to all of them because it takes you to every part of the state, you know, every kind of biome. And if you go into the little towns there, you really get a, you know, you really get to know the state. And also some of them that are really distant, especially up in the Northwest, it's almost like you're in a different state. It's just you feel like you're a long way from the Twin Cities, which you kind of are.
There any place where the mosquitoes are less bad, Barry?
Well, definitely down the southeast, Whitewater and Forestville, because of the limestone, there's not a lot of standing water, so those parks have less mosquitoes. And it really depends on the weather. When we went up north, it was all flooded up there. And we went to Franz Jeffney, and even though it was quite cool, the mosquitoes were we had our van got filled with mosquitoes. It was pretty bad up there. But then you know, if you go up there another year, they'd probably. I mean, we've been up north a couple of years running. One year that was really bad because they had a lot of rain up there. Another year, not at all. So it really does vary depending on how much precipitation there is. So yeah, we've been to somewhere it's been really bad. But
The no-see-ums up in the Iron Range and the Boundary Waters in June will eat you alive.
yeah.
They will.
Yeah, it's normally worse in the beginning of the year, and towards, you know, if you go through the summers, if it gets drier, then there's less mosquitoes and hopefully less wood ticks and
There's
but
another
yeah.
question in the chat.
Oh, oh yeah, someone's asking about the state scientific areas, the SNAs, I think they call them. I can't remember what does that stand for?
Sorry.
The
I think
SNA, scientific and
SNA.
natural areas.
Yeah, scientific and natural areas. Yeah, and then there's also the state rec areas. We've been to some of the state recreation areas. I haven't really been to the SNAs, and there's campsites in the different national forests or state forests too. So there are a lot of other options. I really like the state parks though. I think they're really cool. I want to go back to some again because I've only been to some of them once. Um, so it'd be nice to go there at a different time of year. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm glad everyone's interested in our state parks.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.